And as we continue to honor Black History Month here at WUSA 9, I'm excited to welcome Ben Jealous this morning. Jealous, of course, the youngest person ever elected president of the NAACP, and has continued to make history as the first person of color to be named executive director of the Sierra Club, the country's largest environmental movement, and is currently a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Jealous is out with his new book, Never Forget, Our People Were Always Free, a parable of American healing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh,
it's
thank
good
you for
to
having
see
me.
you.
It's great to see you.
We've got to start with the name of this book because a lot of people are going to say, now what exactly does it mean? So tell us, where does the title come from?
Well, the title comes from my grandma. She passed at 105. Three of her grandparents were born into slavery. And she would always, when we would get into like the sensitive aspects of slavery, like why the black folks in our family are so light, she would always kind of try to cut it off and just say, never forget our people were always free. And it didn't make any sense because three of her four grandparents had been born into slavery.
Right.
So I started digging, figured out she was cousins to Thomas Jefferson.
I was going to ask, wiki, fact, or fiction, you're a descendant of Thomas Jefferson.
We're cousins. We descend from his grandma.
I got it. Okay, please continue.
Yeah, and so, well, it sounds a bit like, the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, right? All men are created equal. Kept digging, and what Henry Louis Gates Jr. at Harvard helped me figure out was that the first woman in my grandmother's maternal line in the U.S. had been captured in Madagascar, and there she had been a slave.
Wow.
And this saying kept being repeated down the maternal line. Grandma said it, her grandma said it, and so on. And what we realized is that she was likely saying something that had been repeated ever since that first woman got here, because that was the only woman that it made sense for her to say to her children, for her to say to her grandchildren, never forget our children were always free.
Right.
And how would a pirate woman who had been enslaved say that? But as a call, as a battle cry, essentially, as a call to insurrection, to self-respect, and to internalizing that if freedom had been your history, it has to be your destiny.
In the book, you talk, it's a series of stories, if you will, and some of those stories uncovering the American mysteries. Could you just touch on that briefly and what a reader is going to find when they open this book? One of those is that we tend to define our family in this country much smaller than it is. When you actually get into your DNA, when you get the elders to open up, you realize we're more connected than we pretend. I discovered that Robert E. Lee is also a cousin as I was doing this book. But one of the things that's hidden from us is the way that working class black folks and working class white folks throughout the centuries kept coming together to rebel, to form movements in the interest of all their kids. The thing that shocked me in writing this book was that I'd always been taught that my grandmother's grandfather was a statesman in Virginia during Reconstruction. But he didn't run for office till like 1880, and Reconstruction had been over for 4 years. And what I realized was that in Virginia, there's this entire kind of lost piece of history that we don't talk about when freedmen and Confederate soldiers, former Confederate soldiers, got together and formed a third party called the Readjusters. They took over the Virginia government in the early 1880s. Why? Because wealthy conservatives were threatening to shut down the public schools. Right.
And so the men who had fought to defend slavery but never owned slaves themselves, and former slaves, formed a third party that took over the governorship, took over both houses, both U.S. senators. It ended up being a majority black party led by a former Confederate general. That's incredible. And a freedman who was my grandmother's grandfather.
That's incredible. You're going to get all of that in the book, Never Forget Our People Were Always Free. Before we let you go, the last time that we spoke, you were running for governor, made it all the way until the general election. Now we have Wes Moore. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I mean, Wes has been like a little brother to me since we were in our 20s. In Baltimore, we're blessed to have 5 black men who have been Rhodes Scholars. In that birth order, I'm third, he's fourth. And as soon as he won the Rhodes, I reached out to him. This time, he called me and he said, "So are you going to run?" And I said, "Man, I'm so busy being dad.
I hope that you would run. And so we had that conversation. I supported him, and I'm very, very proud of him.
Okay, your last name betrays you with that. No jealousy there. I had to do it. You will be at Politics and Prose tonight with April Ryan. The information will be on our website. It's at 7 p.m. It's free. First come, first serve seating. Thank you so much for joining us, Vangelis. We appreciate it as always. We'll be right back.